robotization poses a fundamental challenge to politics. It is up there with climate change, I would say. I think most people don't agree with me, but it is my professional vision on that. And thus, you need to think about this, right? You need to think about problem and you need to think of solutions because political leaders don't have them. This is not really a discussion in Mexico. The only time I can remember is this one campaign ad of Ricardo Anaya, who talked about this only once. Also, most panistas forgot this even happened. And besides that, it's not really a topic. In the US, there's only one candidate, Andrew Yang, who talked about this, and he lost miserably. So you are the one that I have my hopes on. Now, I can help you a little bit in your thought process and how we're going to survive this, because I have been paid this in the past years. So here is, let's say, the beginning of the answer, right? I try to organize it in a flow chart, like a river. It flows, right, from the origin to the point where it goes into the ocean. Just like here, you have at the beginning of the river, you can try to avoid the problem. And then by the end of the river, we cannot avoid anymore. It's more about surviving the problem. And so you get different options, different responses politics could have. And response number 0 or 1 here would be simply doing nothing. This is the neoliberal answer. And then you have the ones that actually try to do something. Upstream, you'd have containing robotization, stopping it from happening. Then we have other things like increasing resilience of the workforce, decreasing pressure on the labor market, and finally, just surviving, compensating for the unemployment that we have. And I'm going to go through all of these next. So we start with what I would call the neoliberal approach, or the fate in the invisible hands, right? The first approach basically is doing nothing. It's thinking that this problem either won't happen or that the problem is going to solve itself. And so the attitude is to just have faith in technology, right? And to be positive, get up early, go to the gym, and everything's going to be all right. Yeah, it's the don't worry about it attitude here. Now, why would you not worry about it? Well, because as a neoliberal, you would have some kind of theological belief in the market, right? You have the idea that the market is some kind of metaphysical property, that it always balances everything, and thus it might lead to a problem, but it will then again solve that problem, right? Technology is a solution to its own problems. We should just have more robots, and then at one point they will somehow, somewhere, solve the problem of robots because we'll have more of them. Because that's always the answer in this logic, right? Anything that capitalism does wrong can be solved by more capitalism. Now, why would anybody think this? Well, on its face value, it's a paradox, right? We're going to solve technology with more technology. How does that work? Well, they have some arguments, and I know this debate very well. One of them, the main one, is that they will say, look, this fourth industrial revolution is nothing new. These robots are not new. People have been saying this for a while, that jobs would disappear, and they didn't, right? People also were scared of that when they replaced the carriage with the car in the second industrial revolution. And the world somehow survived this, right? The world didn't end in mass unemployment. Okay, part of it turned communist, but besides that, right, capitalism didn't end there. So in the future, we shouldn't be scared of this either. It's a very common argument. Another one is that, yes, people lose their jobs, our robots will replace them, but the companies are going to keep them, and they're going to use them for other activities. And thus there will be more productivity, more profit, and things will be better for everyone, right? And a variant of this is actually the oldest argument. This goes back all the way to David Ricardo, who I have on one of my previous slides, is the idea that because of machines, we will have more productivity. And because we have more productivity, we'll have more income. And because of more income, right, people have more money, there will be more demand. So there'll be more money, people are going to go to the strip club, they will make it rain, and, you can catch money there, and, things will be all right, right? There'll just be more money for the rich, and then they will spend that on your services, and therefore we will still have jobs. And the last variant of this is the nihilistic variant, where they say, look, you're right, it will be bad, but there's nothing we can do about it, right? Technology is this autonomous force. It just kind of happens outside of society, and you cannot stop it. So you better hope for the best, right? Let's just be optimistic about this, and hope we can swim by the time the ship crashes. My question always with people who make these arguments, who by the way are usually not the CEOs of companies who are actually robotizing, they're on the more realistic end of the spectrum. When people make these arguments, I often wonder if they're actually serious about it, or if they know what's going to happen and they just don't care, right? And they just tell you for political reasons it's going to be okay. That's a bit of a question. But you have an approach which says that you should do nothing. Now, do I believe this? Well, obviously not. Otherwise, I would not make this lecture, right? Could you imagine? I just would end here. And so there's no problem. I wasted your time for the last two classes. Bye. No. I'm on the pessimistic end of this. I wrote about this a lot of times. I think my latest and best publication on this will come out next week, but that's in Dutch. Might be a bit hard for you to read. But I'm in constant debate with people who think that. Let me just briefly tell you why I don't believe in this solution, or why I'm skeptical of it, right? I hope it's true, but I'm skeptical. First of all, there's just a kind of theological property to this, right? You have faith in things that you cannot really explain me how exactly it's going to happen. You cannot name me which technology is going to create all these new jobs. Right? I can name you hundreds of technologies that will destroy jobs. You can probably not name me one that would create it. But I somehow have to believe in this. That might be true, but I always prefer having a plan over having faith in things. The other thing is that this fourth industrial revolution simply is different than the other ones. You cannot just linearly compare them. They are qualitatively different things. Plus, the whole narrative that in the end it didn't cause jobs is simply not true. The past industrial revolutions did cause massive misery across the world. It's not because you survive a problem that it was not a problem, right? That's saying like because you come back from cancer that you didn't have cancer. That makes no sense. So it did cause a lot of misery. For example, I studied with a person who's a social worker in India, who worked with handloom weavers. Handloom weavers are people who weave by hand. They make very beautiful clothes. And that industry industrialized fairly late. It industrialized about 20 years ago. And it pushed, I think, 4 million people into unemployment, of who 10,000 committed suicide. So it's not true that this has no effects, right? Just as a whole, we survive it, yes, but that doesn't mean that individuals necessarily survive this. And we survived that partly by expanding the world market, right? Communism ended around the same time, so that's a whole bunch of the world that now becomes integrated and more people to sell things to, but we've already done that. So I don't exactly know where these new markets are going to come from. Plus, this fourth industrial revolution is different in what it does from the previous ones. The last industrial revolution, computers, was both a process and a product innovation. Remember I explained you that difference last time, right? It's a process innovation because computers make things faster, but it was also a product innovation because it created a whole new world of consumer goods, right? From video games to web design to whatever, right? And that creates millions of new jobs. With robotization, I cannot name too many new sectors or too many new products that this brings that are not just variants of previous products. I can think of new services, but those services are offered by robots, so that doesn't help either, right? This industrial revolution is mainly about replacing workers. That's the goal of it. That's why companies say they do it. And I think it's naive to think that capitalism would somehow fail in its main objective. right? If the CEO wants less people, who are you to say that he will magically then end up with more people if his Excel table says he will have less, you know? I think it's a bit naive to think this. And lastly, this idea of having more income. We already saw last class that that's not true, right? When I talked about neoliberalism last week, and I showed you this chart of more productivity but less income. Plus, to have more income, you need to be there. Robots are not tools. Remember this, right? You don't use a robot. You can interact with a robot, but if you use it, like if you physically hold it, it's not a robot, it's a tool. So, for example, if you look at the difference between a broom and a vacuum cleaner, right? There's a big jump here, and the vacuum cleaner makes the cleaning lady more efficient, so she'll be able to clean more and thus earn more money. But if you jump from a vacuum cleaner to a cleaning robot, right? The cleaning robot does not make the cleaning lady more efficient. It replaces the cleaning lady. So there's nobody to earn this extra income. Same with, for example, a taxi driver, right? Yeah, the car replaced the carriage with horses, and therefore it's more efficient, and thus you can make more money. But replacing the taxi driver with a self-driving taxi, there's no taxi driver left, right? And that doesn't scale up either. Like if you replace 100 of them, you still have 0 taxi drivers. So I'm more pessimistic on this. Plus, people always say that there's always jobs that people can do, which is true, but it's a bit besides the point economically speaking, right? We saw that about half the jobs are replaceable. Okay. You cannot have a society with 50% unemployment. That is not workable, right? Once you go over 25%, things kind of just the roof starts falling down. So that's a big risk too. But anyway, I'm not gonna dwell on this. So that's a neoliberal solution, doing nothing. Let's say we do want to do something. Let's say you understand what I'm saying. What can we do? Well, 4 layers. First one is containing robotization, stopping it, not having robotization, stopping people from being replaced by robots in the first place. To appreciate this solution, we must first talk a bit about technology and how it evolves. As I told you, I studied science and technology studies in my master. And one of the main things we learned there is that technology is socially constructed. Technology is what it is because we wanted it to be like that, because forces in society shaped it to be like that. Many people have the idea that technology is this autonomous force. It just happens, right? It just happens outside society, and one invention leads to the other. And, you know, we don't really have any influence on that. And I understand why you would think that, but that's mainly because you only think of successful technologies. This is called the symmetry principle, right? If you only look at things that actually end up working, you get the idea that they appeared automatically, right? From one to the other. But what you don't see is all the technologies that didn't make it. For any successful technology, there are like 3 alternatives that could have done the same thing that we didn't have, right? Or that didn't get commercialized. So technology does not lead from one to the other. There's a lot of choices in between these jumps, and there's a lot of unsuccessful technologies that happen too. And the difference between them is that people chose one over the other, right? I gave you the example already of the electrical car, which the communists invented in the 70s. But over here, it never got commercialized because it went against the interests of the oil industry. So they were able to hold back the electrical car for 40 years. Until somebody with so much money made it commercial, right? There's many examples of it. Think of some technologies that are really groundbreaking, right? Think of, for example, genetically modified organisms. It's very common in the world, right? You would think that's an unstoppable technology. Except that in Europe, we actually stopped it. In Europe, European law allows countries to ban this, and many countries, for example, have it banned. We don't have genetically modified organisms, which to here is a very normal thing to have, right? With us, no. So actually politics can stop that. Think of the internet, right? This revolutionary force that would bring free speech and democracy to the world. And then China said, hold my beer, right? Oh no, technology is bringing no freedom over here. We're going to use technology to spy on you, right? So they even stopped the internet. So societies can stop technologies. We just choose not to see it like that, but we can. And thus, what could you do from this perspective? Well, you could not invest in robots, very simply, or artificial intelligence. You could spend 0 pesos on that. Or you could make it a democratic thing. You could have consultas about this. You could ask, for example, should self-driving cars be allowed or not? That could be perfectly a question on the ballot next summer when you have elections, right? First you have to answer, shall we judge the ex-presidents? And then should there be self-driving cars? And people could just decide that. And that's how we could kind of as a society regulate it or not. If you do this, of course, that will have an economic cost, right? So you'd have to invest in other things. The government could take all the funds it gives to artificial intelligence and redirect it to sectors that employ much more people, like tourism, or like universities, or to creative industry, right? We could develop a Hollywood in Monterrey. Instead of going the robotized route, we could take this high culture route. There's things you could do, right? You could subsidize labor-intense industries. You could also tax robots and use that money then to pay for all these things. There are 2 variants of taxing robots. You could tax robots directly, like there's a tax per robot. That is philosophically the best option, except I still have questions on how you would exactly measure this. Like, what is a robot? And what is counts as one robot, right? And because usually they're like integrated mega systems. And how does artificial intelligence, like what's 1 unit of artificial intelligence? That's a bit spooky to me. The other way, you could tax them indirectly. You could just have a tax on high-tech sectors, like a general robot fund, you would call it. Or you could tax the energy, right? Robots don't actually work for free. They consume energy, and you could tax that. And that would be an indirect tax on robots, etc., etc. This could work. As consumers, you could also simply not buy robotized products. You could buy as many handmade things as you could. For example, I do that. Besides this desk and this ugly chair, most things in our house are handmade. For example, that bookcase over there is handmade. You could do that, but that's not a political solution, right? That's an individual solution. Astrid asked, why did you stop it? Because we think it's evil. We think genetically modified organisms are bad, less healthy, and they infect other plants because they come with all kind of copyright consequences. We believe that you should, if you have a seed, it belongs to you, not to the person who designed it, right? We believe that God designed these seeds, not Monsanto. So Europe doesn't like this, no. But that's a whole separate discussion. My point is that you can stop genetically modified organisms and robots. But usually people are trying not to hear what I just said, right? When I start talking about containing robotization, people start rolling their eyes, they start checking their phone because they don't want to hear this. They want robots, right? Too bad, because that is the real solution. But let's say you don't want to hear me, which so far nobody ever did. What else can I offer you? Well, if you're going to have robots anyway, maybe we can try to stop them from replacing people, right? Although that's what they explicitly aim to do, but we can try to make it so that this doesn't affect people in a way. So you would try to decrease the effects of robotization by making the workers more resilient, by making them stronger. The most mainstream answer to this is to invest in retraining, is the educational route, right? You would look at which are high-risk sectors, and you would try to retrain the people in there to having jobs in lower risk sectors. Or you would do active labor market policies. What does that mean? Active labor market policy is when the government actually tries to help people get a job. So it could either by assisting them in searching a job, or it could be by creating jobs for specific people, right? If you've been unemployed for a long time, that the government would help you with some kind of job offer. For example, Jóvenes Construyendo el Futuro is an active labor market policy where the government creates jobs for young people. Now that's a new thing, right? That's part of the fourth transformation. Just to show you, in the past, Mexico never spent anything on this. This is a chart that shows you spending on labor markets as a percentage of GDP. Now Mexico is the red bar. You might think, teacher, I don't see the red bar. That's true, because we spend zero on it. We are where the little red arrow is, that's Mexico, right? Mexico is the only country that spends zero money on getting people a job, federal spending. Which is funny to me, because conservatives have been saying for 30 years that the poor are poor because they don't want to work, but somehow nobody ever tries to solve that. Point is, there's a lot we can do because we never did anything about it, right? So there's a whole new field of policy that we can invest in. But most attention would go to this retraining, to education, right? Very important if you want to think about that, is that you should take an active approach. This is what the experts of the UCD advise. What does that mean? You cannot just tell people, you should go back to school, right? Oh, just become a programmer. That's not how it works, right? People are busy. People might not be able to read. People don't have money for education, right? You know, things are expensive. This doesn't just happen because you say it should happen. If you want this to happen, you need to spend massive amounts of resources to actually get people to do this. This is an important point. I kind of, and this is going to be very controversial, but I hate it when people say education is a solution to problems. Because it's such a free thing to say, right? Oh, yeah, I believe in education, but what does that mean? We've been believing in education for 50 years and things still fail, right? If you just look at just how hard it is to even get Mexicans to finish primary education, then to just think, oh, then everybody's going to get re-educated. No, people don't even finish primary school, right? Leave alone they're going to become programmers. This is a lot harder in practice than it sounds. This is one of the hardest solutions to actually get it done. You need to double the budget, right? Maybe triple it to get this done. So this sounds very mainstream and, oh yeah, let's just get education. This is a lot more complicated. Another thing you could do, totally different, not mainstream, is more communist solution, right? Is it that big of a problem if a robot replaces you if you own the robot? It's a different question, right? It's still bad philosophically, but economically, it's a more interesting situation. So if we had a more cooperative economy, remember Marx's idea where workers own the production, this would be less scary because the workers now could choose if they want to robotize. It wouldn't just happen to their company. It would be a choice. And if they do, then at least they still own the robots, right? They might not have a job, but they would still have an income. So this is also an alternative route you could take. Plus, cooperatives usually are better at surviving than normal companies. We'll talk more about cooperatives another semester. I'm not done with those. So that's all about increasing the resilience of the workforce, right? Even giving them more resources or helping them cope with this. But let's say you're trying not to hear this, because again, people are usually not trying to hear this. Okay, so we didn't stop the robots. We also didn't stop them from creating unemployment. What can we do next? Well, okay, there are less jobs in the labor market, right? What if we can not just decrease the number of jobs, but we can also decrease the number of people in that labor market? So yeah, there'll be less jobs, but there also will be less people, right? Because there's a difference between unemployment and not working. Unemployment is when you're trying to work but are not working, right? Children are not unemployed. They're just not part of the active population. So maybe we could try to change the labor market in a way that there is more space for people in it, even if there are less jobs. It's a different way of thinking, right? How could you do that? Well, you could do it in a fascist way by killing people, but I'm not proposing that. You could better do it with some smart interventions, right? A bit more socialist way of thinking about it. One thing you could do, and that's very interesting for Mexico in particular, is reducing the time people work. If people would work less hours, maybe part of that job could be shared with another person, right? And that's especially true for us because we work the most in the world. Remember, Mexicans work 1,000 hours per year more than Germans. If this is abstract for you, let me give you an example. A night guard, which is a profession I know quite well because we've done some research on that. A night guard, or a guard, right, a security guard, typically in this city works shifts of 12 hours. Which means that to guard a building around the clock, you need 2 guards, right? One for the night, one for the day. Now, what if we reduce the shift of this guard to 8 hours, the legal standard? Now, to guard a building around the clock, you need 3 guards. So you created an extra job, right? So if we would stop massively overworking, right? If we all work 3 hours less, you could take those and puzzle them together into a new job, right? Let's say for every 4 jobs, you would get a new job. That's a 25% increase, right? That could compensate partly for robotization. Let's say you have a 14, let's say we're optimistic, you have a 14% job loss, but you have a 20% increase in jobs. It would even out, right? So by working less, we could actually create more jobs. The challenge then is to keep the income stable. Another thing you could do is increase pensions, both the coverage and the compensation of pensions. A lot of people in Mexico want to retire, but they cannot, so they stay in their job. That has been improving recently, strongly, doubling, but it's still not really enough. Right? It helps old people, doesn't really help them to quit. For example, my father-in-law has been working, what is he? He's 75 or 76. He's been working since 14. This man really deserves to retire, right? He's been working for, my God, like a really long time. He deserves to retire. He can't because of money. If the pensions would be higher, he could retire and you could have his job, right? That would be an interesting way in which people win. And that says by reducing hours, workers selling will increase their needs. No, well, it won't increase their needs, but it could reduce their salary. It doesn't have to. That's first of all, a legal question. Right. Mexico officially has an 8-hour work week. We just don't enforce that. You could enforce it, or you could use other mechanisms that financially compensate people. And we're going to get to them later, things like basic income, etc. So anyway, if you'd raise the pensions, less people would work till they die, and therefore younger people could have their jobs. Younger people who are better at competing with robots, right? Another more feminist alternative to this is a minor one, but I want to mention it, is you could increase maternity leave and you could extend it to men too, so they would have paternity leave. As I told you, in Mexico, women get 3 months and men get a week. In Sweden, women get a year and men get, at the minimum, they're forced to have this, half a year of paternity leave. Let me repeat that. Up to a year with a minimum of half a year paid paternity leave if you have children. That would mean I'm going to have a child next semester, that I would just not teach all next semester. That means that a graduate could teach my course and have a job from that, right? So that would free up jobs too, for especially internships for people. So these are all options where you would have less people needing a job. That would be good. What did you say, Ms. Miranda? They already reformed it. I'm basing myself on what my Swedish students told me 1 year ago.
Yes, I was talking about that here in Mexico, they already reformed it, so there could be more time for parents as well. So paternity leave.
Great. Good. My man AMLO coming through for me. I'm happy about that. All right. But let's say you again don't want to hear any of this, and typically politicians don't want to hear any of this. And I talk to them, right? What's the last thing you could do, right? Let's say we're just not trying to stop robots. We're not trying to protect people. We're not trying to save jobs. Well, the last thing we can do is helping people survive, right? If you're not going to protect me from unemployment, you could at least maybe compensate me for it, right? If we're not going to stop any of this, we could try to redistribute the outcomes. We could take some of the profit from the people who are winning big from this and use it to keep the people who lost from this alive. So this compensation logic, which is the one that politicians are most likely to listen to, typically comes in two big ideas. There's two big options here. One is universal basic income and the other one is unemployment insurance. I've written big reports about both that you could read if you're interested. They're about 70 pages each. So let me talk about this real quick. The first option, the one that you hear most internationally, is universal basic income. What is that? Universal basic income is a policy in which everybody, literally everybody, gets a fixed amount of money each month forever. So everybody, that means you, your mother, Carlos Slim, the rector, and Carlos Salinas de Gortari, all will get the same money each month forever, right? The idea is that that helps to keep you alive, right? And thus, if we have a future where there's no more work, that people would somehow survive. This is commonly used as a solution to this. There are major problems with this idea. I will say that. One of them is that this is extremely expensive because you're not paying just for the people who lost their job. You're paying for everyone, including the rich, including the people who have jobs, including children, including old people. Right? You're paying for everybody. So this leads you to a situation where either you would have to massively raise taxes, like double them, or you would have to cut all spending. That's often what they will argue for. So often neoliberals will actually propose this, like Anaya. They would say, well, let's just cut all public transport, all social services, all other things, pensions, etc., becas. All of this goes out of the window, right? But you get 1,500 pesos a month. Okay, I personally am not in favor of that, but you could do that. And the question is, but how high is it going to be, right? You could also make universal basic income very low. For example, what the PAN proposed, most panistas forgot that the PAN did this, but the PAN proposed to give everybody money forever, last elections, was 1,500 pesos. However, the math on their calculation actually led to 500 pesos, if you would calculate it. So 500 pesos a month might keep you physically alive, but you will live in absolute poverty, right? This is better than nothing. I personally am not a fan of universal basic income for the reasons I just explained to you, but it could be. It is an option that people talk about a lot, and you could have it at different levels and it would have different costs, right? I can see a very low one working, like 300 or 400 pesos, to, for example, compensate for work time reduction. Those could go together well. Then you have another option, standard response, the welfare state response, the old school socialist one, where you are going to help people that lost their jobs because of robots, right? So that would be unemployment insurance. You work, you earn insurance through working, Social Security, and when you lose your job, you get money each month for a limited amount of time, not forever, but let's say for a year or something, until you find another job. That can help people switch between jobs, maybe take some medication in between or some retraining, while keeping them out of poverty. The advantage of this is that this would be cheaper because you're only helping unemployed people, you're not helping everyone. And it's not forever. So this is a more realistic proposal, but it is less permanent, right? UBI, Universal Basic Income, is forever. This is not. That's the kind of, well, both of these things are there to win time, right? They're not solutions because you're not stopping the problem, but you're temporarily keeping people out of poverty or alive, in the UBI case, in poverty but alive, until you found the real solution, right? So these are some of the things we could do. My proposal is to do all of them. I believe in a mixture of those. I don't believe we can just solve it by keeping people alive. I think you should try to both prevent it. You should try to help people avoid it. You should make us less dependent on labor, and you should try to compensate people. I'm currently trying to push the last plan, which is the least ambitious, but on a state level, Niv Leon level, the most realistic. That's what I want of the next governor, and will try to whisper in their ear. So yeah, those are my paths towards avoiding this problem. And I wonder what you think. I just want to, well, I hope you understand by now that technology is not just something that's outside of our democracy, right? Something that happens over there, and we deal with should there be abortion or not, and those kind of questions, but we don't deal with that. No, these things are deeply political, right? Technology is political. It depends on what the government does. It depends on our choices. It affects us. We should have some control over it, and such we should discuss it. And I hope you will discuss it, right? I have been thinking about this, but I'm not as brilliant as you are, Ms. Miranda. So I hope that you will come with better solutions than I do. And if you do, right, then we can only hope that we can actually get them. If you remember, at the beginning of the course, I shared a video of a Greek economist who was talking, when we talked about Greek democracy, it's this Greek economist talking about democracy. His name was Yanis Varoufakis. Yanis Varoufakis is the former Minister of Finance of Greece. And his point at the end of that lecture, when he starts also to talk about robots, is that at the end of the day, it will come down to democracy. If there is democracy, people have some kind of emergency brake, right? They could try to vote this away. Or they could try to demand these solutions. If there is no democracy, you would be managed by some kind of a group of experts who would probably choose the robots, right? So I think whatever you choose, you should also include democracy in your plan. And that's it for this lecture. What do you think? Any questions or remarks, your opinion? Miss Samantha.
Yeah, I don't know really how to formulate this, but I see in a lot of debates about unemployment and all of that, like not enough resources for the amount of people that we have in the world, that some people say that, okay, yeah, we can implement strategies to better the outcome of, for example, this whole issue with technology, but that the fact of the matter is that some people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, I guess, are going to suffer, and that's just a fact, and that we have to like, I guess, deal with it. And I don't know how to feel about that. What do you think about that?
I think that the people who say that are probably not near the bottom. And so it's probably very easy for them to say that. I think humans can solve these problems. There were times where these problems didn't exist. And as a constructivist, I think we do control where things are going. So no, look, people who say there's not enough for anyone, right? This is one of the biggest lies ever. If you look at, okay, let me backtrack a bit. Solving poverty in the world, I'm an expert in poverty reduction, as I've been working on that for 10 years, right? I'm not just making this up. Is less hard than you think it is. It is hard for political reasons, but it's not hard for any economical reason. The bottom 50% of the world, right, the poorest 3.5 billion people, own about 3% of the whole world, right? On the other hand, the 1% of the world owns more than half. What that means, I once calculated this, I don't have it right here, but what this basically means is that if the rich people had 1% less money, you could solve all extreme poverty. That's how big inequality is, right? So the idea that there's not enough for everyone is a complete illusion. You could tax the rich 1% more and you could feed the world with that. That's not going to happen. But that's, you know, and doing this practically is very difficult, right? Because there's no world government to do this. But there definitely is enough on Earth for everyone. That's a very big lie that there would not be enough for everyone. So no, I would not accept that point, but that's my vision on it.
Great, thank you. I agree.
Any other questions or remarks? Or maybe you disagree with me, right? Maybe you're much more hopeful. That's cool. Miss Susanna says. It's a hard problem, right? No, we cannot forever pay for all unemployed people. I don't believe that. I see this as a measure to win time until, you know, a real solution. One of the earlier things I mentioned is happening. But well, winning time is relevant, right? We also need that. I wonder how many of you worry about robots. Juno does. That's one. Okay. Well, maybe not all of you worry about robots, but I do hope that all of you think that this should be a debate, right? That, let's say, next presidential election, there should be a round on just this. Do you agree with that? That you would want to hear what Morena, Pan, Pri have to say about this? Even just to force them to have an opinion at all? Okay. Well, that's my wish. I just want to start this discussion. I'm on the pessimistic end, but I always like to listen to more optimistic people to help me sleep at night. All right. Then this was, let's see. Okay. Then this was my last class about problems. There'll be one more class next time, tomorrow. That's the final time we will talk about things, which I will give some kind of philosophical end to this class. So I invite you to that. Because of how the scheduling works, Friday I don't have enough time to do anything serious, so I will let go of that one. But tomorrow should be already our final class. So please show up. Let me also take participation. Any other questions about, well, I think the final project is done, right? There's nothing I can answer for you. Wait a second. I said, what do you mean with resilience of the workforce? Resilience is a term that comes from biology. Resilience means how the potential of an organism to come back from trouble, right? So if you have grass and you step on the grass, can the grass get back up again if you water it? That's resilience. So the more resilient something is, the more it can come back from problems. So if the workforce is more resilient, that means that bad things are going to happen to the workforce, but they'll be able to bounce back from that. So you're going to lose your job, but you're going to find another one. That's resilience. Resilience is often misused in politics. Like people, like only focusing on means that you're not really trying to solve any problem. You're just trying to make individuals responsible for bouncing back. But it is a part of any solution. Is any other questions I missed? What robots? Sophia. Yeah, well, my own writing is a good start. But where is that published? I will comment on this lecture after I close it, Miss Sophia, with some materials. All right? Okay, good. Then I'll let you go because we're over our time. You shouldn't miss your next class. Take care. Bye.
Bye, teacher. Thank you very much.
Yay. Thank you, doctor. Bye.
Bye.